Thank you, Stacy, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you to the Women's Council of Realtors Michigan for inviting me here today, and to all of you for being here today. The theme for this convention is Bring Back the Magic. And today I want to talk to you about something that might surprise you. The science and practice of bringing back the magic. Because magic, real magic, isn't just luck. It's alignment. And when you practice living your dream, life itself begins to reveal how it is meant to be mastered. Not through control, not through force, but through alignment. Through devotion, through the quiet, relentless practice of living what calls you forward. In other words, alignment isn't luck, it's design. The sustainability of your results mirrors the integrity of your internal systems. Devotion is disciplined iteration focused on what compounds value. I learned this the hard way. From the outside, my life looked perfect. I had the house, I had the car, I had the wedding ring, I was a dentist. And then in 2 short years, it all collapsed. And as I sat there in the ruins, depressed, anxious, cynical, I wondered, is this it? Is this what all of my life has come to? Is this what my life is going to be? When was the last time you stopped? You really stopped and asked yourself the questions that matter. Who am I? Where am I going? Where am I? And I don't mean on a Friday night after you've had one too many to drink. I mean that quiet voice that you hear when you're falling asleep, but you haven't given it any other time of day to speak. My own crisis taught me how important it is to make room for that voice, to create space to stop, to check in, and to realign. Because if your process is aligned, the results will follow. But if your process is not aligned, no amount of hustle is going to get you there. In fact, the price of unaligned hustle is burnout. We all know that well. In the midst of my collapse, there was a moment I decided I wasn't going to quit. And just because of who I am, that meant I had to master this thing called life. What does that even mean? To do so, I realized I needed to build from a grounded place within me. I wanted to start at the very foundation of who I was, a craftsman of my own life. And that's where the Dreamer's Framework began. I didn't know it at the time. And what I found is this, that quiet voice in your head that you hear as you fall asleep, it's inviting you in. It's inviting you into something. It's inviting you into your dream. And in the practice of living your dream, that's where life is mastered. The blueprint of your life lives there, in your dream. But let's be honest, as soon as I say, follow your dreams, right? Maybe you feel what I felt. Oh, here we go. We've all heard this before, right? Part of us wants our dream to come true, but also a part of us is scared. Get real, man. Come on. Because let's face it, dreaming can be dangerous. As I was struggling to put my life back together, I even thought, maybe the problem is dreaming itself. Maybe dreaming is delusion. And so I stopped, thinking that it would make things better. And you know what? It actually did, for a while. I felt more in control. But it hollowed me out. You see, without a dream, you drift, untethered. And so I came back to this question. No, to dream is not delusion. To dream is the fulfillment of being alive. And yet, once you grab hold of a dream, you open yourself up to new dangers, burnout, delusion, doubt. Am I going to make it? Unless you change. Unless you change in the way that your dream is inviting you to change. I wanted to find that middle way, that way that got me closer to my dream, but protected me from burnout, from delusion. You guys know the story of Icarus? It's a Greek myth. He and his dad are in prison. His dad's a bit of a craftsman, genius type. And he makes these wings out of wax and feathers, and he says, Icarus, we're going to bust this joint. And comes with a warning. He says, Icarus, don't fly too close to the sun. Because if you do, your wings will melt and you'll fall into the sea and die. Well, for those of you who know the story, Icarus flies, he's very ambitious, and he literally burns out. His wings melt, he falls into the sea, and he dies. What's not often known is that his father gave a twofold warning. Not only to not go too close to the sun, but to also not go too close to the sea, because the water could weigh down your feathers and pull you in. So there was this lesson here of going for the middle way, finding that middle way. And so the only way that it made sense to me moving forward was to find a way to hold both the optimism to imagine something greater than you are, the realism to test it, to refine it, to embody it. Because the truth is, living your dream will ask you to change, but only in the best ways. What I needed was a structure to carry me there. And so the question becomes, how do you dream without drifting? How do you dream without collapsing into fantasy? How do you dream without taking to burnout? And over the course of a few years, the Dreamers Framework was born. Clients have used it to build health in sustainable ways, to build their businesses that carried soul, to avoid going down wrong career paths, and to understand their spouses, which if you have a spouse, you know how much of a feat that can be. So why does it work across such a wide range of challenges? And I think, as you'll see, it's because it speaks to the very foundations of the human operating system. Your life is a project, and you are its craftsman. To master this project, you have to master yourself, right? So if we really want to answer the dream versus delusion question, we have to ask something deeper. And that was the question I asked myself when I was wondering how I would rebuild on first principles. Who are you? Are you your thoughts, your feelings, your perceptions, your beliefs, your possessions? No, you're something deeper. And I love the definition. You're an unspoken truth that yearns to be embodied. Part of you longs to take shape in this world. And we experience that raw, unspoken truth through our actions as natural talent. What are your talents? We experience the raw, unspoken truth emotionally as our dream. That's why your dream calls you forward. That's why when you're separate from living your dream, it feels bad. That being the case, why is living your dream so dang difficult? I realize there are forces inside of you, forces inside of all of us that pull our focus away from our dream. In my own life, I felt this clearly as I was trying to put the pieces back together. I wanted to pick myself back up, but really I was afraid to do the work. I call these forces inner conflicts, and they always seem to get in the way. And these inner conflicts are the seed of burnout. If you want to master life, you have to resolve these inner conflicts. That's the work. As you do, your dream begins to materialize around your efforts, not because you chase it, but because, well, it's a natural consequence of the work that you're doing. The work that your dream invites you to master. How do we grab hold of these inner conflicts? They're not tangible. They're inside you and they're hard to get a hold of. How do you begin to even work with something that you can't see or understand? And so I started on this quest to develop a way to make these conflicts more tangible. The way in to the framework is something that we're all very familiar with. It's our own discomforts. Seemed like a good place to start. We all have them. And maybe there's something there that leads us to the next step. So let me introduce the framework. I'm going to introduce it in such a way that most of us experience it on a day-to-day life, so you can kind of orient, and then we'll go back through again and see if maybe there's a better way through. So discomfort, what is discomfort but a feeling, right? You wake up in the morning with a pit in your stomach. That's a feeling. But a feeling is more than just happy or sad. The latest neuroscience tells us that a feeling is your body has a response. And then your mind makes up a story to explain why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. And then perception builds on that story. It's the lens through which you see the world, shaping how you see yourself and what's going on in your environment. And when inner and outer clash, you feel the anxiety, you feel the restlessness. And there's a hunger to return back to balance. And so what do? Well, we start thinking. This endless scroll of words in our head. Trying to make sense of the tension, trying to make sense of the contrast that we're experiencing. And, well, it's a little annoying when you have these intrusive thoughts always coming in, but that's how it works. It's how you learn, it's how you adapt, it's how you adjust. But when thoughts repeat, they harden into beliefs. And these beliefs become templates that shape how you see yourself, how you feel, even tell you who you are. And here's the danger. When those templates, they don't just stay in your head, they start to seep out in all of your behavior. And one day you wake up and you go, I didn't choose this. When in fact you had. One day you're on autopilot, acting on habit, not choice. Not from alignment, but from old patterns. And some would call this ego. Embodied behavior without intention, habits that keep your blinders on. And we have egos, they serve a good purpose. They help to keep us safe because a limit can bring safety. But a limit can also be a prison. An ego is both. It's really tough to realize when you're in the mud and your face is bloodied that the reason you're there is your own fault. Gosh. But that's really the only way that you can show up and do the work that you have to do, to take ownership of it. Ego is what resists the dream, convinces us that dreams are dangerous. As it stands, for many people, ego is really the source of their persistent inner conflict. The real truth here is not that change is dangerous. Change is perhaps the only way we can find that middle path so that we can go after our dream and not burn out and not live in delusion. Drift is the risk. Burnout is the risk. Delusion is the risk. Change is adaptability. Change is how we might ever hope to find that middle way. And yet I don't see ego as the villain that it's often made out to be. I mean, we can no less live this life without an ego than we can a physical body. In fact, we might even see our ego as the psychological body that we all have. And just like our physical body, it can be neglected, distorted, broken, but it can also be strengthened, refined, and renewed. And so is there a way to work with the patterns that are helping us with our safety, with getting us places, but let go of the ones that are trapping you? Because let's face it, our beliefs are untested. We inherit them, we cling to them, and we twist them to fit our reality. So the call forward, I believe, is not to destroy our ego. If you've ever tried to do that, or if you've shown someone else what their ego is, watch how big their ego gets, right? I think the answer is to recenter it. To recenter it on what we truly value. So let's retrace our steps back to discomfort. But this time, instead of twisting it to our old patterns, let's keep this truth in mind. That every discomfort hides a desire. That on the far side of every pain is something that you value. So when you feel frustration, when you feel anger, when you feel jealousy, don't dismiss it. Instead ask, what does this say about what I value? And now you've just clarified what matters. Feelings point the way, but rather than collapsing into a belief conflict, you shift into an exploration of your values. And that shift is everything. When your values ground you, you can begin to test your beliefs without your ego getting defensive. You can let the false ones die. While beliefs can be limiting, though, without them, we don't really know how to proceed. I mean, your values tell you what matters, but your beliefs tell you how to get there. They tell you how to move forward. So yes, we need beliefs, we need values, we need beliefs and values working together because together they generate some inevitable progress. Values which are enduring that always point the way no matter how far, much progress you've made. There's always more to go. And flexible beliefs that allow us to adapt to the challenge ahead of us. At some point you have to act, right? You have to execute. Or else you just give the stuckness more power. At least that's what I found in my life. If we just lived every dream, then that in taking action toward that dream, that's where we start to really, that's where the rubber hits the road. But we proceed with care because we know the dual dangers that await us. Beliefs can be wrong, so we test them relentlessly. Your connection to your values can be fuzzy, so we test those too, relentlessly. And in this way, we test not only what is personally true for us, for ourselves, through our values, but also what's true in some larger sense, some real sense. How do we test these together? And I remember when the answer to this came to me, it was just such a gift. Remember, I was trying to figure out how I was going to build my life back up on first principles. Principles are how we do this. A principle is a testable value and belief. The values that you have, they give it meaning. Your beliefs tell you how, but principles give it form. Just like that, we've taken the intangible and made it tangible. I can work with a principle. You can work with a principle. I think this is how we recenter the ego. Those old programmed beliefs that keep you stuck are rewired in a way that create the conditions necessary for bringing predictable results. Predictable results that come through a process of iteration that I like to call the discipline lab. This is where principles are tested in action. It runs on 3 rules. The first rule is consistency over intensity. I tell my clients, the discipline here is to take your behavior and make it so small that you can't fail. I mean, most of us, when we start a new discipline practice, we go all in, right? Big intensity. We're setting ourselves up for failure. I mean, when a New Year's resolution comes around, we tell our friends, this is what I'm doing. And of course, in the back of our mind, we're going, I don't know, we'll see how long I go. Start so small that you can't fail. Rule number 2, test your beliefs like a scientist. Now, when you bring intensity down and your consistency goes way up, now you start to see the patterns in your life. It becomes much easier to test the results that you're getting. And if a belief doesn't survive that testing, it doesn't belong in your identity. Rule number 3 is to mind discomfort. We know that on the other side of every feeling, there's something that you value. And so, as you're living your principles, you reflect and you say, what is this feeling saying about what I value? And so here's how it works. You've got a principle. It's an amalgamation of your beliefs and your values, and you practice that principle for 7 days, 2 weeks, month, whatever. And you track 2 signals. One signal is an emotional signal, and one signal is a reality-based signal. The emotional signal is, does this feel aligned? Is this draining? Yeah? And that tells you something about what you value. The second signal is reality-based. Does this confirm my belief or does it expose it as false? And so if it's draining, it speaks to your values. If it's false, it speaks to your beliefs. You're testing both here. And then you decide, you hold that principle until you get just the right balance of consistency and intensity so that you can start to see what works. And if it works, then you scale. That's when you bring the intensity in. And if it doesn't, then you just pivot. You're small, so there's no risk here. It's easy. That's it. That's the loop. And when you repeat this week after week after week, something changes, folks. At first, discipline feels like duty, behavior that follows your principles. But over time, it shifts. Duty becomes desire. Effort becomes energy. And then real motivation takes hold. And I'm not talking about the fickle, easy come, easy go kind. I'm talking about behavior that's aligned with your values. It's no longer about pushing yourself. It's about being drawn forward by meaning, something that's pulling you in. And when meaning takes root, this is so brilliant. When meaning takes root, motivation matures into something that blows discipline and motivation right out of the water. I call it devoted behavior. The discipline of necessary change, practiced in the service of your dream, becomes sacred by design. Discipline becomes devotion. Devotion becomes embodiment. And look at that. We're right where we ended up with the whole ego thing, but we have a whole bunch of intention behind it. There's a repeatable architecture that calls us forward to the success that we are seeking. Behaviors that come naturally are anchored in something that is meaningful to you, your dream. This is how you change your behaviors without force. So tomorrow when you wake up with that knot in your stomach, know that it's not just a feeling. That is the voice of your dream calling you forward. And what you do next determines the results that you get. What I've learned is this: when your behavior embodies your values, the results begin to mirror your dream. Because your values and your dream, they come from the same unspoken truth within you. This is the map. Drawn from the framework assembled around your dream. That's the work. When we take the primary elements of the ego and we lay them over the elements of the discipline lab, we get the full framework. Embodied behavior that's no longer a bad habit, but a living transmission of your dream. These elements organize into 3 layers of the human experience: credo, processing, and behavior, and on 3 pillars: integrity, authenticity, and identity. Integrity: do as you say as you do. This speaks to truth, not delusion. Authenticity: love what you do what you love. This speaks to alignment, not burnout. And identity: be who you are, not who you are not. This speaks to aim, no drift. So how do you dream without slipping into delusion? How do you dream without burnout? Well, here it is, folks. No burnout, no delusion, no drift. But it's more than just the results that this gives you. It organizes a deep credo spiritual level within you. And as you begin to define your beliefs and your values, that organizes how your processing layer works for you, how you think, how you feel, how you perceive. And as you order that, your behaviors become a natural expression of all the internal work that you're doing. That's why when your results are embodied in the values that you live, well, that's why you get the results that you'd expect. This is sustainable without the need to force behavior. So let's revisit mastery, because I no longer feel that mastery is control. I actually see it as devotion, a devotion to test, a devotion to refine, a devotion to embody. Mastery is devotion to perfecting the studied mechanisms of your process that give rise to your desired results. The craftsman who's changed both by the work as much as the work itself. Imagine how your results would change if you devoted yourself to studying these mechanisms. Now, I don't know your dream, but if we connected it to the dreamer's framework, I wonder what it would provide you. Where would you go? Who would you be? What would you do? This is why mastery is the only real option. Within the process of mastery, drift, delusion, burnout are systematically eliminated, removed from the very architecture that your dream will rely on to become real. Not perfectly, not overnight, but steadily, tangibly, even inevitably. Isn't there something about this that feels mythic, as if your dream is the very path that you were meant to take? The path that organizes everything within you, that calls you to resolve those inner conflicts, and in doing, achieve everything your heart desired. This is not theory, it's lived, it's tested, it's real. So mastery is not a tactic, it's not something you do to force results in your world. Mastery is a way of being. And so if you're going to be anything, be a dreamer. Creating space to really stop and ask the questions that matter, that's the central purpose of my work. Because we all experience collapse in this life. And collapse comes with a twofold lesson. First, collapse tells us that we can no longer pretend. And collapse tells us that, well, it invites us to get real about what matters most. And your dream carries everything you need to do that work. So before we close, let me share a few simple ways that we can keep creating space together. If what I've shared has spoken to you, if you hear that voice, I would invite you to honor it. First, I live giving talks like this, so if you know a room where this message would resonate, please pass my name along. Second, please reach out to me. I've sat where you are, and I thought, I need to talk to that guy, I need to listen, I need to talk to that girl. And you know what? I don't, because I get in my head about it. Reach out, please. This is what makes this much more fun. Finally, in your program, you'll find 2 cards with QR codes on them. One leads to my newsletter. And for those of you who joined today, I prepared a resource that will help you dive into the Dreamer's framework, those pillars: integrity, authenticity, and identity. In a couple weeks, I'm proud to announce that I'll be releasing a self-study guide that will allow you to walk through the Dreamer's framework, plug your own story in, and see what comes out of it. It's been a pleasure sharing these moments with you. I know that together we can make impossible inevitable. I've always called myself a Pathfinder, but now I see that we all are Pathfinders, just trying to find our way. Each of us will find it if we have a dream and we show up for the work that it calls us to. That is how you go from burnout to blueprint. Thank you.